Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're uncovering the epic, bloody, and honestly mostly forgotten history hidden right beneath the quiet South Korean city of Chungju. Now, you know the usual suspects of ancient Korean history, right? Gyeongju for Silla, Buya for Baekje, but Chungju, yeah, usually gets left out of the conversation. But as we're gonna see, this unassuming provincial city hides an absolutely massive secret. Pretty much every major ancient kingdom marched through here, leaving behind footprints that are literal national treasures. So let's explore this wild story of conquest, unbelievable archaeological discoveries, and a city that was the ultimate ancient prize.
To kick things off, I want you to picture a dark, kind of creepy, cave-like room in the dead of winter 1980. The local farmers, with no crops to tend to, found this perfect secret hideout up in the hills of Nuamari. They brought in oil lamps, sat around on these huge flat stone beds, and just played intense games of cards and mahjong. And while they did that, the local kids were running through these interconnected caves playing hide-and-seek. It was this perfect, cozy local secret. Well, that is, until things got out of hand. A bunch of money was lost, and one very bitter local decided to call the cops and raid the den.
Now here is where it gets absolutely wild. When the police officer showed up and shined his flashlight into the darkness, he realized this massive cavern wasn't natural at all. It was a gigantic 1,500-year-old stone burial chamber. We're talking about a massive room with a 5-meter-high ceiling, stretching over 17 meters wide. And those flat stone beds the farmers were sitting on? Yeah, those were actually sacred resting places where the ancient dead had been carefully laid out. The officer actually knew a bit of local history, and he looked around in absolute shock. Because those little shelves the gamblers were using to hold their snacks and drinks, they were built-in niches holding priceless ancient pottery. I mean, before this raid, some locals had even taken the smaller ancient bowls home to use as dog food bowls. Seriously. The officer obviously knew exactly what he was looking at, kicked everyone out, and reported the site. And just like that, a random police raid totally rewrote Chungju's modern history and triggered a massive archaeological dig.
Section 1. The War for Iron.
So you're probably wondering why on earth were such elaborate noble tombs built in a random provincial town in the first place? Well, ancient Chungju was far from just a quiet farming community. It was the ultimate prize for ancient kingdoms. Think of it like the ancient equivalent of a mega steel corporation, like a modern-day POSCO. It was one of the 3 largest iron production hubs on the entire Korean peninsula. Plus, it was packed with gold mines. And you know how it goes in the ancient world. Iron equals weapons, armor, and farming tools. Control Chungju, and you absolutely control the military and economic powerhouse of the era.
And because of that strategic wealth, the city basically became a bloody chessboard. First up, in 369 AD, Baekje's brilliant king Gunchogo recognized the value of the iron and swiftly took control, building massive ironworks. Then, fast forward to the 5th century. The mighty Goguryeo Empire expands southward, pushes Baekje out, claims the iron, and leaves behind these massive stone monuments. Finally, in the 6th century, Silla's King Jinheung sees his opening, sweeps in, and secures the resources he'd eventually need to unify the whole peninsula.
Section 2. True Owners of Nuam Damri.
Okay, so who actually owned those massive graves? Well, to lock down this newly conquered iron hub, King Jinheung of Silla pulled off a brilliant, if totally ruthless, forced migration strategy. I mean, he couldn't just leave a vital asset like this unguarded, right? So he forced Silla's highest Jingol, or true-bone aristocrats, to permanently relocate to Chungju to manage the territory. And alongside them, he forcibly moved the newly defeated citizens of the Gaya Confederacy. We're talking attendants, servants, even master potters from Silla's capital. They lived out the rest of their lives there, and when they died, they were buried right in those hills.
And we know exactly who is buried in the biggest Nuamri tomb, the one they used as a gambling den, because excavators found this incredible artifact. It's called the Yoksima Pyong gold belt. It's an inverted leaf-shaped gold buckle. And in the ultra-strict social hierarchy of ancient Silla, this incredibly flashy status symbol was reserved exclusively for the absolute highest-ranking nobility. So the top-tier management, sent straight from the capital, they lived, ruled, and died right here.
And it wasn't just a few isolated graves. There are over 3,000 of these distinct Silla's tombs scattered all across the Chungju region, stretching way up into the local mountains. 3,000! That staggering number marks the final resting places of all those displaced nobles and their descendants. It essentially turned the entire landscape into a massive ancient graveyard for Silla's relocated elite.
Section 3.
Goguryeo myth and burial culture.
Now, when you have thousands of ancient tombs just sitting around in your backyard for centuries, people are going to make up stories. And for generations, the locals believed this terrifying myth. A lot of the tombs had a distinct hole at the top, so a rumor spread that these were the sites of Goguryeo. That's this horrific mythical practice where people supposedly abandoned their elderly parents in caves and just passed them food through a hole until they starved. Super dark, right? But the historical fact is way less morbid. These tombs were actually built with a specific architecture called Gungyong, basically a corbelled dome ceiling sealed with a large capstone. Over 1,500 years, the rain and erosion just washed away the top dirt and collapsed the center, which created those creepy-looking holes.
The reality actually shows a highly practical and super respectful burial culture. These were not places of abandonment at all. They were highly functional family crypts. The archaeological digs showed that these tombs actually had working stone doors. The process was simple but profound. When a family member passed away, the descendants would open that heavy stone door, respectfully place the deceased inside on one of those stone beds we talked about, and then just close the door securely until the next time it was needed.
But it gets even wilder. Before these elaborate stone tombs were built, and long before Confucianism brought in strict burial rites, the dominant practice around here was pengjung, or wind burial. So the community would mourn the deceased for 3 days, but then, instead of burying the body, they'd carry it up the mountain and literally leave it exposed on a large rock or suspended in a tree. The idea was that nature would reclaim the physical form, and the spirit would literally turn into the wind, returning to the earth in the most natural way possible.
Section 4. Melting pot of 4 cultures.
So all of this non-stop conquest and migration ended up creating something completely unique. Because it was constantly being taken over by different empires, Chungju became known for the Jungwon culture, which is basically a massive historical blender. Every kingdom left its absolute best tech behind. Baekje brought the advanced ironworks, Goguryeo left imposing stone monuments, Silla brought these sprawling family tombs and incredible gold craftsmanship, and Gaya, well, they brought something truly exotic to the mix.
Inside these tombs, archaeologists found stunning, incredibly colorful glass beads. And the craziest part is that historical records and the artifacts themselves suggest these Gaya artisans had actually acquired glassmaking techniques that originated all the way from India. So by bringing this advanced technology to Chungju, they further enriched this wild historical melting pot, making the city a genuine fusion of 4 distinct ancient nations.
Section 5. Chungju's History Awakening.
But listen, all of this incredibly rich history came with a huge psychological price for the everyday people living there. Just imagine living in a city that is constantly being invaded. For centuries, the locals dealt with brutal warfare, forced integration, and literal armies marching right through their backyards. And it deeply traumatized the region. By the time the 20th century rolled around, the people of Chungju were so exhausted by outsiders bringing trouble that they actively isolated themselves. During the Japanese occupation, authorities tried to build a major railway right through Chungju, but the locals fiercely rejected it. They refused to give up their land. So the railway bypassed them entirely, and Chungju even lost its status as the provincial capital. They literally sacrificed modernization just to be left alone in peace.
But today, that mindset is finally shifting. Chungju is opening its doors, waking up to the incredible value of its past, and getting eager to share its proud, painful, and deeply fascinating legacy with the rest of us. And you know, the story of the gambling den tomb is really just the beginning. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What epic, hidden history might be buried right beneath your own feet, just waiting for the right person to shine a flashlight into the dark. Think about that the next time you take a walk in your local hills. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.